Hello, everyone. Thank you and welcome for being here in the weekly mastermind, Uniting the Death Care Professionals. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Today, we have a very great conversation that I don't think many people get to be a part of. And we are actually going to be speaking with Dignity Memorial regarding actually having a funeral service. So we have discussed in this group already pre-planning for a funeral. Today we're going to deep dive into, okay, it actually happened. And now what are we going to experience? What is the family going to experience when they're faced with this situation? So if this is your first time here watching this video, welcome to the Wellness and Legacy group where we're passionate about connecting death care professionals. My name is Carolyn Castillo. I represent Probate Property Angels, where we help families that are dealing with inherited properties, particularly the ones that are a little bit more challenging between family dynamics, sudden tragedies, things that become a burden to the family. Our team helps the families from clean out to closing to make it a less stressful and respectful and the most profitable possible. So you can scan our QR code there, check out our website. Our industry is called the death care industry. Some people are not familiar with that terminology. I started in this space working in probate and trust real estate. As I started looking to the left and looking to the right, I realized that there are so many other professionals that are working side by side with me, sometimes even simultaneously. So we originally started off just working towards like probate trust and the probate estate administration, funeral services, insurance. When the beneficiaries are getting their life policies and inheritance. But what we realized is that, anybody that works in this space, you are naturally a component for pre-planning. So as much as, we're all here working in crisis, we have this natural desire to share how to prevent probate, how to prevent the, sudden crises and actually pre-plan. So we have actually successfully interviewed everyone from the pre-planning component, even down to senior advisors, senior real estate, home health care services, hospice. And today is actually our final, where we're walking into post-death. So now is basically where this individual has passed away, maybe in hospice, maybe in their home, but now we're crossing over to that other side where we're primarily dealing with the family, the post-death administration, okay? This is the side of the business that I primarily work on. So I'm excited today to be getting into this where we're going to be learning about what is the family faced with when their loved one actually has passed away. How does everything really work out? So our vision for the group is creating a seamless connection between the wellness industry, which serves individuals prior to death, and the legacy industry, which supports individuals and families post death. So, what we recognize is that both sectors often serve the same customers, sometimes simultaneously, and our group aims to foster a deeper understanding and collaboration across these critical stages, ultimately uniting our industry together as a whole. Okay. So this, what you're standing in right now is our mastermind, where we've decided as our group of professionals, we meet here locally in Ponte Vedra, where we are connecting with each other to learn about each other's industries so that we can better serve our communities, our families, and make a greater impact in a time that is 100% guaranteed and a very emotional and vulnerable period for people. So today, without further ado, let me go ahead and unshare my screen. We are going to be meeting with Mary from Dignity Memorial. And if you remember, we actually had Mary Dignity Memorial on here with Elizabeth Branding Bird, where she was sharing with us the pre-planning component, but today, Mary, you're gonna walk us through the interesting side of a funeral experience and the funeral process. So thank you, Mary, so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm going to go ahead and highlight your video here. And Mary, if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing with us, how did you get into this industry, being in
It
the
actually
funeral?
fell in my lap. It's not something that I ever said, oh, I want to go to school and do this and be this. It was not. I actually came into the industry part time at the very bottom, as most people do in careers, if you're really not sure or passionate about something. So I came in as a part time receptionist. And then before you know it, I was up the chain. And then my mentor came to me and said, I think you have a knack for families, for loving on them when they need it the most. You have a cheery disposition, even though most people don't think funeral industries should be cheery. Some families are in different stages of grief when they enter our facility. So if they pre-plan for it, they're kind of prepared. If they're not and it's a tragedy, then of course their emotional state is very, very different. For me, it ended up that I went to school, took me a long time to do that. And then once I got that, I was mentored by a great person who had been in the industry for almost 50 years before he actually retired, and then kind of handed the reins over to me. And then my mom died when I was very, very young, about 18 years old. And I knew the experience I got in the industry was very cold, very methodical, very businesslike. And that was something I did not want my community to experience. So I just made it a virtue that I would never walk into a room in a sad nature unless it needed to be a sad nature. So, and I think that's really helped me in my community to where folks will say, I have a friend in the funeral industry. She's not sad, but she'll actually help you and give you everything that you need knowledge wise, even if you don't use our firm. I believe in that strongly, that even if you don't use the Dignity brand, that you at least educate yourself to know what you should do and when you should do it.
Mary, I love that so much. And even like off air, right when you came on camera, I could actually feel your warmth, and I could
Thank
feel
you.
your presence. So
Thank
I
you.
can only imagine in person, how comforting that must be,
Absolutely.
And I mean, it's just still kind of funny your story, starting, I mean, who even becomes a receptionist?
I didn't even know what it was, to be honest with you. I just thought, oh, I could answer the phones in the front door. That doesn't take a lot of work. And boy, did I not know what I was getting into. I did not.
Yes,
So,
yes. Wow. Well, clearly you were called, and
absolutely.
yeah, clearly you're an angel. As I say that so many times in meeting with people in this space, it's a very vulnerable space. It's, people, it's a space that people can take advantage of. Like you said, your mom, when you experienced how it was very cold, it was very business,
Hmm.
and that's myself too. That's how I got into my space is I was like, wow, I'm seeing these people get taken advantage of. I'm seeing like investors like buy the houses for, three times less than what they're worth, and it's like that's what ignited me. It was like this passion that came out to say, give people the information, let them know like what the value are, what their options are.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's
Absolutely.
really neat how we all kind of like come from the same cloth in a sense.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's never
So,
our decision. It should be somebody's decision. They should be gainfully knowledgeable in whatever it is and then make their own decision.
you got it. You got it. So let's start uncovering this. As I've been looking forward to this. Personally, myself, I've never planned a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
I've attended some funerals over my time, but I really don't have any context. My Nana passed away. I wasn't of age to really be in the business side of it. But my mom was, and so I'm eager to really find out. Like, so let's assume for today that there wasn't a pre-plan.
Okay.
Okay. I guess we could go both ways, but let's say that there wasn't a pre-plan, okay? How do you see that families initially contact you? Are they just kind of looking up Google and
Yes, It can be Google based. It could be a relationship that you have. In our industry, though, we cannot what we call ambulance chase. You cannot do that. We can't solicit. We can't make partnerships with hospitals that say if you have a loved one that passed away and they don't have a firm or they can't come up with something that they then recommend us. That's
Mm,
not something that can happen. Hospice has a list of providers. All they do is hand the list. I will tell you in this industry, the best thing for me, and I'm only speaking for me personally, in my business in Clay County in St. John's, is I answer the phone. A lot of time in this industry, even though in the Google search it says we're here 24 hours, we're available 24 hours. The building is not open 24 hours. So if someone is calling at 2 a.m. and they're getting a storefront facility or a facility that does not have particularly a Dignity brand, they may not get called back until 9 o'clock the next day. Sad for the family is they need help right now. They
mm.
don't need help at 9 a.m., 7 hours later. They are being pressured by a hospital or a facility, if they don't have a refrigeration at that facility, to move a loved one from point A to point B. So I have found that just picking up the phone and being courteous, providing the information that's needed to a family, and letting them make those decisions, I will say 75% of the time is what yields me the business that I get.
Wow.
Because families are so grateful that I answered the phone, that I carry that disposition of love and tender to them, provide them any questions, answers to any questions they have, and then let them make a decision. I'm not pressuring in any capacity. I wish that every family would use us, but sometimes families need something very different, and that is okay. It has to be what makes their heart happy, and it has to be what makes them okay with the final disposition that they've made for their loved one.
So, Elizabeth kind of gave us a little bit of insights on, the actuality of everything, right? And I
Mm,
think that that's what is like the shock I think that people experience, is that they really like all of a sudden, from 1 minute to the next minute, you may know that your family is sick. You may already be prepared for it if they're at hospice or they have hospice at home, right? Like it's kind
right.
of more like, okay, this is going to happen. But like you said, she explained to us that as soon as the person passes, then they have to tell biohazard, or I'm going to say biohazard. I don't think I said the right thing. They would have to tell the police. Is it
Right, or the
police?
facility. Yeah,
Right,
so sometimes it's calling 911 if they're not under like a hospice care. They'd have to
right.
call a police officer. They would come out and do the medical side. Hospice usually does that in that capacity. If they're at a facility, a nursing home, things like that, there's always a charge nurse or someone in place that handles those. And then they have to unfortunately move from that immediate grief to decision making.
Right.
So that could be very difficult for someone whose loved one was just notified maybe 48 hours ago that they had cancer and that they're
Right.
going to die in 3 weeks. And instead of 3 weeks, it was 2 days later. So
Right.
we all think we have time. And
Mm.
that's the sad part to it is we all say, oh, we have time, but no one
No.
knows.
No.
Yeah, no one knows until that moment happens for us. So when they get that unfortunate call that the loved one has passed away, those facilities, unfortunately, are very clinical and they need to move in order to stay appropriate to the protocols that they have. So that's where
So
the scare is.
right. So Elizabeth had shared with us, basically the loved one has to be assigned to a funeral home.
Correct.
If a funeral home is not chosen, then they would actually go to the health department, if I remembered this correctly.
Correct. The health department, it has to go somewhere, and it depends on the facility. Every facility is different, but the medical examiner, if they just deem that they want the loved one, then they come and that becomes governmental. But as long as the family is given, again, depends on where they pass away at. Sometimes we're just called to be an interim for a family, that they have to go somewhere because they have to move from one chain of command to the next. So if
Mhm.
it's a police officer, a hospice nurse, a hospice facility, they have to be moved now legally from one person to another and not necessarily to the family. So a police officer is never going to leave a family at home by themselves with a loved one. They're going to wait until we come or the medical examiner comes. Hospice can leave a loved one there with the family only because that's their standards and protocols. They've been at home, and that's the choice of the loved one to pass away at home. So it is okay for them to stay until we get there to release.
Okay.
Hospitals usually can 48, 72 hours. They want a loved one out of their facility and going on to the next process.
Okay. So, basically, are they having to make the decision right in that moment? So they're having to say to the police officer, they call and say, someone's not breathing, or
Correct.
get to the scene, there's no resuscitation available. It's confirmed they have passed, right?
Correct.
Then right then and there, the family basically, the police officer's like, we've got to take them to the medical examiner, or we've got a call to have the medical examiner come.
Correct. Not necessarily come, they will just verify that the medical examiner doesn't want them if they feel that it is suspicious.
Okay.
If they're unattended, no one was there, those kinds of things, then a police officer has to do an investigation, medical, as far as medicines, things like that. Then they talk to the medical examiner. The medical examiner then will decide if they want the loved one or not. Meaning, in the state of Florida, someone who is prescribed medicine within the last 6 months, even if they never saw them again, they can see a doctor one time. If that doctor prescribed them one pill, they are responsible for the care of that loved one and the death certificate that ensues afterwards. So therefore, they can't say, I haven't seen him but just one time and I'm not comfortable signing the death certificate. The unfortunate for the medical facilities, or excuse me, the physicians, is they have no choice. You prescribed the medicine, you took the care and custody of them when they were living, you have to take the care and custody when they pass. So the
Mhm.
only time the medical examiner is going to get involved is one, foul play, homicide, suicide, those kinds, accidental, they'll get involved. But other than that, if that person was prescribed one pill within the last 6 months, sometimes within the last year, that doctor is responsible, even if they're 35 years old. And that is can be very shocking to people. It doesn't matter the age, it does not. Because if they
So,
were being treated for hypertension or diabetes, things like that, and no one harmed them or they did not harm themselves, then 9 times out of 10, they passed away from whatever treatment was being provided.
okay. But it could also have been coincidental, obviously, right? That they had prescribed them some type of medicine and then they passed away from
Correct.
different causes, I guess you would say.
Correct,
Right?
correct. The unfortunate thing is the medical examiner is not going to pull every case like that. And so the only way for you as a family, if you're in that unsurety, is you have to pay for a private autopsy, which
Mm.
can run about $6,000 for the different entities of who wants them. And there are very few pathologists that do private autopsies. So that figure is really common of about 6 grand per person.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm tracking with you. So you're saying that somebody passes away, the family is not 100% sure on how they passed away.
Correct.
That's what we're talking about. And so
Correct.
you would basically have to have the doctor that was most recent seen by that person would have to sign a death certificate.
Correct.
But is there any liability for the doctor, or is there any, is it hard to get that done by any means, or
Sometimes doctors will give a pushback, but there are statutes and laws and oath that they take that they agree to when they become physicians in the state of Florida. It doesn't mean that they won't give a pushback, but a lot of times they'll have a conversation with the state office vital statistics or myself or someone who's knowledgeable who just explains, there's no repercussions. The loved one is already gone at this point. The family just needs some confirmation so that we can move forward, whether it be with cremation or burial. Because again, we cannot move forward with those dispositions until the doctor does his part. So we
So,
all have a part in it. There's no real liability, I would say, unless the doctor is a doctor, and we've all experienced them or heard of them where they're I hate to call them pill mills, but if they're in that department, but even then, they're a licensed physician and they must sign off on the death certificate. There's,
exactly.
again, you can't judge people on what's going on in their lives, and what they're needing from a physician.
Now, where does that actually take place in the process? Is it
Mm.
happening after the body has already been taken to a facility?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So we have accepted the loved one in our care, and the family has said we want to use Dignity Memorial. And then that becomes the part of the funeral director to begin that process of contacting the doctor, confirming that the doctor will sign. He's already spoke to the police officer or hospice. He already has had that one touch that he knows a phone call is coming. Then we send it to him electronically after the family provides us the information. They sign off on it electronically now with the fancy systems that we have, and then they're certified through the state. Now, let's say the medical examiner doesn't like what the doctor put on it. The medical examiner can reject it, send it back to the doctor. The doctor then has to revamp or have a conversation with someone in the medical profession, not the funeral industry, because again, I'm a funeral director, not a physician. So they
Mhm.
can have conversations with someone in their medical facility, and then they can proceed forward with what they need to place on it. And sometimes people put
Why?
unknown, and
Yeah,
that's
I was gonna say, why would they reject it? Why would a medical
if
examiner?
someone puts aspiration pneumonia, so if you're in the industry, aspiration pneumonia is where you kind of get water and things like that settled in your lungs, which means you could have choked, things like that. That word aspiration is a trigger word in our field that then sends that to the medical examiner. And then the medical examiner may ask them to remove that word and just put pneumonia, or they may have a conversation that says, here is why I placed that. If the medical examiner feels as though that's a justifiable reason, he'll leave it and let it go. See what I'm saying? So it's
Yeah.
always those two eyes watching to make sure that no one at a facility has been harmed by a nurse or a doctor, because those things could be from neglect potentially. So it's a lot of parts of it that they really do their due diligence, because at the end, when we do cremation or burial, you ultimately never want to have to either exhume someone or deny cremation because we haven't done our due diligence. And so
So,
we do that.
yeah, so this is obviously stuff that most people have no clue
No
at
clues
all.
behind the scenes.
Right.
Absolutely.
And like zero,
No.
of the, different legal processes that have to take place
Right.
administratively.
Right.
So it sounds like you at Dignity Memorial, you guys are actually helping them through, the processes,
Correct.
what needs to be done, and you're
Correct.
following up, following
Correct.
through.
And
Okay.
we don't really share. I mean, most people in the public doesn't know this process even exists. They
Right.
come in, they make arrangements, we see loved ones, we carry through with their wishes. And only if there's a hiccup of some kind that does not allow us to carry out the family's wishes do we bring it to their attention. If
Mm,
it doesn't cause them any concern or delay, then we just keep motoring on
handle it.
with what we need, because it's not something that's pertinent to them. They just need to know that Mary has it. She's going to handle that. She's going to take care of it. And as long as I ultimately have the permission to either A, cremate or lay them to rest, it doesn't help or hurt their heart to know the difference.
Now, are you providing the family with the death certificates?
Yes. Ultimately, at the end, once the state does their part in certifying it and everybody's given the appropriate approvals, then we are receiving them from the State Office of Vital Statistics and returning them to the family in a follow-up meeting.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, so that was like really in the weeds there, but it was
Yes.
I was particularly interested just to really know the formalities. One other thing I'd like to ask is I have very commonly found in probate that there's situations where families are estranged and then the loved one is maybe left there for a couple weeks before anybody knows about it, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
then they get like the neighbor or something, the police go over there, do a welfare check, and uncover what's happening. What happens in those cases if there really is no like next of kin, or there's nobody, like they were literally, the police were just called out, and how does that transpire from there?
So everything is different. Folks think that there's a cookie cutter conversation to this. There's not. It's based on the individual situation. So, one situation, the family is estranged, the loved one has no one. However, the loved one has money. Okay. So, if the loved one has money, they're not considered indigent. So, then really, truly, a police officer or someone will call a firm, and that's where that loved one will be. And then it's up to that funeral director to go through all that legality that we just talked about to get
Hmm.
everything together. If
Hmm.
a person does not have any money, meaning they are indigent, then they would go to who holds the county case. And the county case is held by Eternity Funeral Home, and they then determine a research of the following. Do they have a bank account? Can they take assets to that bank account? Do they have property? Can they take that property? And it kind of goes down that legal
Hmm.
hole that's necessary. And indigent families, while no one should be treated in a delay that's undignified, in that process sometimes can take 45 to 60 days because you have to go through courts and things like that for approvals because they don't have someone to say, I will take control of my loved one. I will make sure my loved one is taken care of, dignified, so that way they can be laid to rest. Then you have to get a government entity into it. But in that case, a lot of times the state of Florida is very particular. It does not matter who steps up as long as someone steps up. So even that neighbor can step up and say, Miss Betty has been my neighbor for 50 years, and I absolutely do not want to see her there laying. They could walk in the door, make arrangements, sign a few other documents, and then normally we would do burial in that sense. Because if a family comes back and says, you took my loved one and I didn't authorize you, then they can always exhume a loved one and pay those financial costs and do what they desire with their loved one.
Hmm.
Cremation, it's a little difficult because once cremation happens, it happens. So there
Yeah.
would be a little extra step to that.
So, getting into that, you're talking about, a friend, a family member can step up. If a friend or family didn't step up, then it looks like there is a court administered process that oversees, people that are, and I'm sure probably one of their first steps is trying to locate next of kin,
It
right?
is. Yes.
Right. So hopefully they would have the right resources to just find the person. And do they have an opportunity to deny, like that they
Yes.
don't want to be a part of it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sometimes it's in the children department when a father or mother has been estranged from their children from a minor through an adult age. And now
Hmm.
you've got a 35-year-old child who you are now asking to take financial control over a parent who has been absent for 35 years.
Yeah.
Sometimes people have different emotional statuses and they just don't want to be part of it. They can sign away their rights to anybody they choose to.
Yeah, yeah, I've learned that the school of hard knocks way,
Mhm.
different family dynamics and the
That's
reactions of people thinking, oh, is everyone really emotional? No, there's a lot of cases where they've been estranged, they just are inheriting their dad's assets, but they haven't spoken to him in 20 years, or
correct.
families ridden these people off, and it's very interesting dynamics. So it's
Yeah.
true, every family is different. So let's get into a little bit about the cost.
Okay.
So in these cases, it's sudden, there wasn't a pre-plan. The family now has just had to either call you at 2 a.m. and say, can you help my family? They're going to your facility, or maybe they're going to, the downtown, let's see,
Yes.
what is
Yeah.
it called? What is the name for if they're
The
not
medical exam.
medical examiner's office?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
So
So I'm sure that families that are thrust upon this, they're probably a little concerned with what it's going to cost. Like they don't even know
correct.
what it is. So
Correct.
are they making financial decisions before they choose to send them to you, or
No. The
okay?
sad part to that is every facility has their own pricing based on what they offer the community. So you do have storefront cremation facilities that offer inexpensive cremations. However, it's just that storefront. They don't own their own crematory. They're just taking your loved one, sending them off to a crematory or some independent person locally, maybe not locally, maybe in Palaca, maybe down in Orlando, could be anywhere, wherever
Right.
they are contracted. And then, so if a family needs that because of financial reasons or just because of their heart needs it, that's okay. But your cost factors are going to be minimum.
Mm-hmm.
Minimum in the sense of maybe in the couple $1,000 range. If you're looking for a facility like us that can provide you services and we own our own crematory and we can show you where your loved one moved and we can tell you who touched your loved one, because we are very, very specific. And if you touch a loved one with us, there is what's called a chain of custody, and we can tell you exactly who has had any possession of your loved one. Then that cost factor for immediate cremation without any types of services can run you about $4,000. But it's peace of mind. Two
Mm-hmm.
different conversations, ultimately the same thing, peace of mind. If you want cremation with a memorial service, meaning no loved one is present, not embalmed, and all of those things, then you're probably about $8,500. If you want a loved one embalmed, dressed, casketed, everything as if you were having a funeral and going to a cemetery ground, but instead going to cremation, you're probably in between $14,000 and $16,000. If you want a burial today and you have no prearrangements, no funeral services, no cemetery, no marker, no nothing, it could run you $20,000 to $25,000 for one
Wow.
person.
Wow.
So think of that as a husband and a wife. If I pass away today, my husband would potentially have to have that expense of about 20,000. And that's middle of the road. That's not the cheapest of the cheap. It's not, the most expensive casket. It's kind of your median. You could go less with different casket options or vault options, but you could also go more expensive too. So it just depends on families. I see more times than not when parents will not prepay or not kind of have conversations with their kids and then tell them they want burial when you have a 19-year-old kid who
Mm.
cannot barely feed themselves today. And now they've been given that unfortunate task to honor their mother and father with burying, and they don't have the financial means to do so. Because there's no popular cemetery anymore like back in the day where folks could be cremated or they could be buried for free. There's no more of those services anymore. So it's
Yeah.
just super sad when families have to make that unfortunate decision in the moment and cremate a parent because
Mm-hmm.
financially that's all they can afford.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can imagine being in that situation.
Super sad.
Tell me about covering those costs though. What are ways that a funeral can be paid for
Mhm.
that is not cash out of, the next of kin or whoever's dealing with it? What are,
Gotcha. So
yeah.
there's many ways. You can do life insurance, which is assignable. Not all life insurances are assignable. Some companies, do not do that. They could do any number of credit facilities. There's a gazillion of those out there in the world.
So there's actually funeral credits for just funerals in general.
Right. Care
Okay.
credit is the main one. There isn't any other in the sense of funeral based, but you could go to your local bank, things like that. I will say that most of the time, folks are using life insurance. If they don't have the financial means in their bank account, they could use things from their trust. Downside to trust and probate and things like that is the timing that it may take to get those funds out. And funeral industries cannot wait for that legal process to happen in order to get the funeral going. So bill has to be paid before services can be rendered. And it's just sad in the industry, though, that we don't have ramifications in the sense that, we can't do anything to a family if they financially cannot come up with those funds after we perform the services. So that's why in the industry standard is to have those bills paid. So really, truly, the only way you have is going to be cash, check, that kind of concept. Life insurance that's assignable, any type of annuities that pay out. Sometimes those pay out quickly if there's a beneficiary attached to it, or going through some type of care credit or personal credit through the bank or your credit cards. A lot of families put them on credit cards and then file the insurance and then pay their credit card off before the next cycle comes in. So it just
Mhm.
depends.
It depends. So with the life insurance, it has to be assignable to the beneficiary.
To the funeral home. So assignable for us means that me and you are, I'm your child, you pass away, I am the beneficiary. The policy is $15,000, and I tell the insurance company I want to assign my money from that to the funeral home. So I sign a piece of paper that says that, and the insurance company will cut the check directly to the funeral home to ensure that the funeral bill gets paid. And then whatever is left over from that assignment will come to me. So the insurance company will cut two checks.
Okay. And you have to be paid in full before you can perform the services.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And the maximum time that you can hold a loved one before putting them to rest is there a specific date or times?
No,
No. No.
no. Sometimes it becomes, again, in our warm heart that we want to help families. If they financially cannot take care of things with us, then we begin to look for other facilities, other options for them. Sometimes families have to make that unfortunate decision to go from burial to cremation. And so,
Right.
therefore, we begin to work with them on having family conversations that
Mm,
we do not get involved in. We do not sit at the family table with them to have these conversations. We
mhm.
provide them guidance and let them make family decisions.
Right, right. Okay, so let's maybe jump into now what are the main options? I think maybe most people know cremation,
Mhm.
burial.
Mhm.
Is there a third option?
There's many other options. So
Really?
yes,
Okay.
so you could do, um, well, maybe not many. There's a few. You can do now anatomical donation, where you prepare for your body to go to medical science, and then they do all kinds of good loving to you. Your mind can work its magic and what that looks like.
I
Um,
don't want to.
yeah, exactly. But they could do all of that wonderful things. And your body is being used for the education of doctors, physicians, things like that, that folks that need that. And then there's a fee that's attached to that. And then once that process is done and they're no longer anything viable for you to be used for educational purposes, they cremate you, return you back to your family. You can have what's called green burial, where it is basically skin to dirt, no embalming, no casket, no vault, no nothing. You're basically wrapped in a shroud, and from which you came, you go back. And there's one over in Gainesville called Prairie Creek. And it is, we go out, we lay the loved one into the earth, basically shrouded in some type of cotton, and then they are put dirt over them, pine straws. Earth does what earth does to a loved one over that period of time. And then once you kind of know that the decomposition has finished, is at the beginning, there's a mound that goes up over the earth. That's when you know that they are still in their natural state. And then once that begins to settle down and the ground flattens, that's when you know decomp has happened and all the gases has happened. So that's kind of when you know the final disposition has happened, when the earth is laid. So you could have that. You could have burial at sea. It's rare that that happens. A lot of old school Viking loving folks kind of like that concept of being buried at sea. Military love burial at sea just because 9 times out of 10 they've been on a boat for 30 years or 50 years. And so they want to go back to that ocean that they've spent their life on. So those are many ways that you can have dispositions. They do have
What
some
does
other
burial
medical
at sea
ones.
look like?
Burial at sea would be the same concept of going out on a boat, and you are in a container, but it's holes that are poked in it. You're in it, preferably not in bonds, because again, chemicals going back into the ocean is not something that's eco-friendly. So you would be unembalmed, and then you would be pushed off the side of that boat and you would go into the water. And then that container is some type of biodegradable where over time it kind of disintegrates, not immediately, but over time. And then you become what nature is, fish food and all those kinds of
Does
things.
it float or does it go
It
down?
sinks. It sinks.
Okay.
That's the whole part when you put holes in it that
Okay.
goes into it. And
Okay.
the weight of both the container and the loved one takes it to the bottom.
Okay, very interesting. What
Yes.
the one about the where you're going to the doctors for, research and things like that.
Mhm.
Is there any financial gain from participating in those activities?
No.
No.
So
Okay.
it's just usually it is educators that will do that.
Okay.
People who are teachers, people, even the green burial, they want to give back even after passing away. So
Hmm.
they are the type of mindseted folks that want to do those kinds of things.
Right.
There's still
Is
a
that
financial cost to the
is
family.
that the same as being an organ donor or no?
No, two
Okay.
different things. Organ donation or is in the living part. So they keep you alive and
Just
allow you to,
okay.
yes. And then you live on into someone else. This one would mean that you're completely passed away. None of your organs were viable for life. And you're used for the educational purposes of physicians, like at Gainesville.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then what would you say about what's the eco burial at Perry
Mhm.
Creek? Is there a capacity of land or it can take in an infinite amount of uh
It's not very popular right now. So they have a lot of space. They have acres, hundreds of acres,
lots of space?
um, lots of space, but they also don't have uniformity out there. So if we go out there and I want that, I can say, I just want to be by this tree and that's where I lay. There's no like headstone. There's no none of that. It
But
is
could another body had been buried on top, like, because you're basically
yeah,
going into the ground.
correct. So it's so new that there's not that ability to where someone's underneath you and you don't know it. They do, even though they don't do markers, they do geocache stamps. So it's a wrought iron, and then there's a geocache metal on top of that wrought iron that's placed in the center of the grave. So
Okay,
it's they know where folks are. They just don't have a specific headstone, nor will they allow a headstone because
gotcha.
that's not the intent.
So are people having like a funeral service as they would if they were doing a traditional burial
Correct.
in this experience?
Correct. Everything is the same. The difference is no embalming because we're not putting anything chemical back into the earth. We go out. You can choose to have a service or not have a service. The lady that I did was an educator. We had her here at a funeral. She was not physically present in the sense because, again, she was unembalmed. We had an ice cream social for her. And that was what she wanted with her students and her family. And then her family and I took her out and we didn't do a funeral per se. We went out, they dug the earth, the family dug the earth themselves. We laid her in it, they covered her up, we said a prayer, and we left her.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
pretty nice though.
it
That's
is.
really nice.
Very earthy, very calming, no formality to it. And some of that is nice that you don't have a preacher doing those parts of it. You're
Mhm,
you're experiencing her afterlife in the things that she loved,
mhm.
educating, an ice cream social, and things like that.
Yeah, I love just throw in the ice cream social.
Yes, it was so
Makes
amazing too.
perfect sense.
People are like, we're having ice cream, and I was like, that's what she wanted. I just provide what she wants.
So, is there a financial benefit of doing that option, or how does that cost
Yes.
wise, how does that
So the
factor?
difference in it, remember I said if you did burial with all the bells and the whistles, kind of middle of the road, you're 20 to $25,000. This
Yeah.
will probably cost you
Mm,
$5,000, because again, you're not doing all the parts. There's no casket for 4 grand. There's no vault for 3 grand. There's none of those extra expenses that are entailed in that. You owe Prairie about $2,000 or so for their property for conservation, and that's what it's done. You're really donating to conservation, and then between what's done, you're probably, like I said, $3,000 or $4,000.
mm-hmm. And I think is it basically people are just, hey, what's the big deal to have a tombstone? Like are they kind of
Right.
that's kind of where you're getting away from that, where
Correct.
some people I guess get freaked out about getting cremated. They're like, I don't want to be, burned alive.
Correct.
That's interesting. I think that, do you think that trend will go on a rise more than the traditional burials now? You
No.
think people just like,
Um, the youth today is about like cryogenics. They want to do that melting you down stuff that's really not out yet. They want to do more of that sci-fi kind of concepts. So
yeah.
unless we give a shift change and it becomes more talked about and more known as what can be done, I don't know. I think you'll only have it in the educators and the folks that are mindseted of earth and back to earth and saving trees and those kinds of folks. Those
Mhm,
that's a geographics that you're looking for there.
mhm. So I actually ran across a funny article this weekend.
Mhm. How convenient.
Yes, and it was a perfect timing for this discussion because it's basically a movement of people that are, according to the article, there's already 65,000 people that have
Mhm.
opted into this, and they are in essence downloading their consciousness
Okay.
and basically it's like uploading like everything about yourself, like your
Yes.
memories, your it's quite interesting because you can actually remove memories that don't serve you, right?
Gotcha.
But it's really trippy, but there's one I don't know, you're not gonna call it a human, okay? But so it got started. This lady couldn't imagine being separated from her partner. So
Okay.
she, created this whole thing. That woman is actually a robot right
Got
now.
it.
You can literally
Yep.
look this up.
Yep.
And she can recognize through the eyes of the robot, okay?
Correct.
She can recognize her loved ones. She has the sense of humor that she had.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's really the one part is it's obviously very sci-fi, very like kind of
Correct.
creepy, like you're gonna have like a bunch of soulless like robots,
Correct. Correct.
amongst us.
Correct. Correct.
But the part that I was interested in it was that you would actually, if something like this really took off, you would actually be able to know your ancestors. Like
Correct.
actually know them, like
Correct.
what they laughed at, what their thoughts were, what their experiences were. Because, like, right now, we only have like 23andMe, where it's like, oh, yeah,
Correct.
I have this cousin and that, but you don't really know who those
Correct.
people were. And so,
Correct.
this would be a way that you would actually, for generations, could actually say, oh, wow, that my ancestor did this, this person did.
Correct. Correct. Is it through the same process though of them also communicating? Like they could communicate with the robot?
You could keep your loved one amongst you.
Oh, see,
There you
that's why I say something like the green burial is not something that's going to trend because the youth today is very sci-fi, very
immortal.
technology driven, very advanced
They're
over us
gonna be
folks that are not that
immortal.
advanced. So,
Yeah. They're gonna be immortal.
yeah,
Okay.
they are. I will be in the ground.
Yeah. Bye,
I'm
Mom.
not that great. Yeah, I'm not that great that I want to pay for a robot to run around with me. Mm-mm.
Do you remember that movie Death Becomes of Her?
Yes, yes, yes,
Oh
yes,
my
yes,
gosh, and she was like, trying
yeah.
to keep herself together and say, actually, how glamorous was it to live immortal? Not that
Right,
glamorous.
exactly. Yeah. I'd like a good
Uh,
wrinkle cream. I'd like that. That's all I'm looking for.
Exactly. Wow. Very interesting. So, obviously we're having a very lighthearted conversation
Yeah.
over all of this. When the family is having to make, these, thrust decisions, I would probably, we're gonna circle back around funerals again as we
Mhm.
continue this mastermind. So I'd love to definitely have you come back on because I think there's more that we can discuss that would goes beyond the hour that we have,
Absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. There's
But
there's so many more intricate parts to the funeral industry, even with, folks in your side with probate and things like that. Just because someone's listed as an executor of someone's estate does not give them the right to a loved one. It gives them a right to a loved one's property, but not to their physical self. And that's a lot of misconstruction when an executor will come in and say, I'm an executor. And for the funeral industry, that means nothing to me.
mm-hmm.
Nothing. The daughter takes precedent or the next of kin takes precedent over any legalities like that. So
Are you do you experience it because you're really the front person, like
correct.
literally the first stop on the journey,
Correct. I
so
experience it more than I want to.
mm,
And it's just that because they believe that, Betty has said, when I pass away, take this document, you're in charge. And that's not really the case. And so, as probate folks and as attorneys and things, I think they need to do a better job of educating the loved one to say, this is only your stuff. This is only after the fact, not when you actually pass away. It's kind
right.
of that period of time between the family has control between the time they pass away and the time the death certificate is issued. And then from there, the death certificate and the rest of it becomes that attorney, or excuse me, that executor becomes that person that's in charge then.
Mm-hmm. Right. If they are doing estate planning, if they are doing, that's what we were educating within our group is, funeral planning should be a part of all estate planning.
Correct.
You
Correct.
can plan
Absolutely.
for everything, but then if you don't plan for your final disposition, where you're going to go, all of those things can be accounted for. And what a peace of mind. I mean, when from your experience, seeing someone that comes in with a pre-planned funeral plan
Mm-hmm.
versus a family that there is no plan.
Correct. It's so much easier for a family because if you have children who are alpha driven and you've got more than one child that's alpha driven, then that loved one has already made the decision. There's no decision to be made. And it's my job as a funeral director to ensure that I execute the decision of the loved one, not the decision of the family. So if that loved one has already picked out a verse, a side kind of flowers, they've already picked out what they would want in a casket, I'm obligated under the contract that they've written with me to execute that exact item. Now, can a family come in and change disposition? No. If someone comes in and says, I want to be buried and I prepay for burial, and a family wants to change to cremation after they've passed away, they have to go get a court order to do so. And
Mm,
there's no judge I mean, I should say no, because there's probably a judge, but not many judge would ever take a family and change a disposition based off of that, as long as it's prepaid. If it's
right,
not prepaid or pre-made into some type of estate or something like that, no judge would go against a loved one,
right.
which is
And
a
I
blessing.
Yeah, it is. And I guess it could also be that if a person is that next of kin, but the family, maybe they had disagreements or were estranged, I'm sure it could swing the other way, right? Where
Correct.
that person that is, the chain of command, but
Correct.
actually is someone that, was not in their best interest, right? Now that's given that person that power position,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Correct.
So they
There's
probably
a
in
lot
their
of parts to it.
standing, yeah, they made an executor because they wanted that person, but then they come and say, no, it actually is the daughter.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So, wow.
It get very
So
tricky.
this literally was like a drip in the ice bucket,
It is. We could go on for hours, trust me.
Yeah,
We
really.
did 15 more of these.
And I think honestly, it's just because it's never spoken about.
It's
Like,
not
I've never had a conversation of such, my whole life, like you really only deal with death when it comes upon you, you know.
correct.
And in my business, people say, I don't know how I got connected with you, like it's just
Mhm.
like, the good Lord just aligns, where it's like people don't even know what they don't know, right?
Correct.
They don't know
Correct.
all the moving parts and they're just
Correct.
thrust upon it, and now
Correct.
gotta maneuver. So
Correct.
we're hoping, with having these conversations, getting this out into the internet world, within our professionals that are in our group, we can help be educators and help kind of spread that light out there.
Absolutely. And
Yes.
I'm for participating in all of that knowledge
I
because
think
I
you're
think
the
we can
the
all do
best
it.
person. 50 years of experience, or how long
Yeah.
have you been in the
I've been in it
business?
27 years. My
27 years.
mentor was 50.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Wow,
Yes.
interesting. You
Yes.
still have a glowing smile on your
Thank
face.
you.
You've stuck around for all of this. So, thank you, Mary, so
You're
much.
welcome.
We will be placing your information in this so professionals in our group can reach out to you and also our community. And we'll definitely let you know when we're coming back around on the funeral space
Okay.
because we would love to have you come in and help sharing your information.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you so much, Mary. Have a great day.